Hello and welcome to Grocery Pod. My name's Sean Kasednar. We have a big show for you this week. I'm going to be talking about food service at retail with not one, but two amazing guests. I'm joined once again by AWG's Executive Director of Deli, Bakery, and Food Service, Michael Purcell. We are also talking with Andrew Brown from FMI. Before we get to Andrew and Michael, I want to remind you to please subscribe to Grocery Pod. Subscribing means new episodes will be downloaded for you each week. You can find Grocery Pod on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, YouTube Music, or any other platform you use to listen to podcasts. Thanks for joining me today, Andrew and Michael.
Hey, Sean. Great to see you
here.
Andrew, why don't you start us off and give us a quick overview of food service in grocery stores?
Great. Yeah. So thanks for having me. My name's Andrew Brown. I've been working in grocery stores since I was a teenager, and a few years ago found myself here at FMI, which is a trade association for the food retail industry. So we obviously are in DC and do a lot of lobbying and things like that. But I am on the industry relations team, which means that I get to spend a lot of time with folks all over the country that work in the grocery industry. And one of my focus areas is food service at retail. And the way that came about is a few years ago, our board of directors, which is made up of CEOs from organizations all across the country, including AWG's Dan Funk, identified that we need to focus more on this department. It's an important department to the store. It always has been, but it's really taking center stage as we see kind of the market shift, especially after COVID. You know, all of a sudden consumers were at their house and they learned how to cook. They learned what they like to cook, what they didn't like to cook. And the grocery store was one of the few places everyone was going every week. And so we found food service was a way to either introduce folks to new items, for them to have as close to a restaurant experience as they could at the time, or just fill in the gaps when they didn't want to cook. That's kind of the birth of food service at retail on the FMI end. Is we put together a group which Michael co-chairs with me, that gathers leaders in the food service at retail space from across the industry. So we have probably, I'd say now, about 45 to 50 folks from both retailers and suppliers, third-party providers, really anyone that has anything to do with food service or retail. And we gather on a quarterly basis and once a year in person to just share thought leadership, learn from one another, because like many things, there's a lot of pre-competitive issues that this group can help each other solve and help kind of elevate the conversation around food service or retail. And then there's also just lots of inspiration to be had. You know, we all work in this industry. We all can't reach all consumers in the US. So it's a great way to kind of bounce ideas off each other, see what's working in one market and how it can be applied to another. So that's food service at retail from the FMI perspective in a nutshell.
Yeah, Michael, what do you hear from our member retailers about food service at retail?
Yeah, it's a mix of things, Sean. I think, obviously, since Andrew stated, and it's been a great collaboration with FMI and for AWG to be a part of that. But from the members, twofold. You have, obviously, we have over 1,000 members as part of the co-op, right? So you have varying degrees of requests, varying degrees of expertise with our member stores in this food service arena. So one, it's being able to provide the programs and the tools to help our retailers win in this food service space, right? At the end of the day. So some are asking for solutions, and then there are others where we're bringing solutions to them and kind of educating them on the opportunity here, right? So it's funny because as I look back, I was looking at some things prior to this podcast today, and I've been with AWG, I don't know, probably about 4 years now. And when I started with AWG, food service represented less than half of all deli prepared or deli sales within grocery retail. And just over the last 4 years, it's now more than 50% of all total sales dollars of deli sales. So it's made a pretty significant quantum leap. And and that continues to grow and grow at a very high rate. So I think, part of our job here is, at least within the team that I work within, is how do we set up our members for success in this food service at retail arena, right? Knowing that everybody's at a different spot, right? And how do we identify the spot that they're in, and how do we give them some tools and solutions to help kind of capture some of these dollars, right? How do we help them win against restaurants, C-stores, and show off some of the abilities that they have.
One of the reasons why I have Michael on the show all the time is because he provides me perfect segues into my next questions. Andrew, this sort of brings up the idea of the sheriff's stomach war. Can you explain what that is?
Be glad to. So, I think as we kind of move into the current times that we're in, we're realizing that consumers have all kinds of different preferences, needs, wants. And it's really about how we meet the moment for the consumer, right? So everyone has a finite amount of food that they eat a day. And everyone has different way. Some people work very early in the morning out in public. Some people work from home, all different times of the day. And so when you think about it, the traditional notion of breakfast, lunch, dinner is way out the window. Snacking kind of came in there the past few years. And now it's just, I think everyone lives within a little bit of their own reality. So as grocers and as other folks that operate within the food industry, it's all about how do you get that share of stomach? How do you meet the consumer when they need food? And for a lot of folks, it's breakfast, lunch, dinner, snack. But, for some folks, breakfast is the main meal of the day because they're getting off of their night shift. For some people, lunch is a constant. I'm going to eat out if I'm out of the home. For some grocers, dinner might seem like a natural, but people might be going to a grocery store exclusively for other meals and they eat out every night. It's just, so the overall share of stomach idea is how does grocery break into that space and make sure that we're able to meet consumers for whatever their eating moment might be.
Michael, when you talk to our member retailers, what do you hear are some of the things holding them back when it comes to succeeding in food service? I know that you mentioned that, it's grown quite significantly since you joined AWG, but what's keeping them from growing even more?
Yeah, it's a great question, Sean. I think that, probably a couple things come to mind, right? And I speak from the food service side of the world because prior to joining AWG, I spent quite a bit of my career on the food service side, which is great. So I kind of see both sides, right? And I've come to learn and appreciate both sides in terms of the business and what people are trying to do and win in their individual businesses. So I think, a couple things that, one, the mind, we're probably, while some members are moving quickly, we have a lot of members that are adopting at a very slow pace, right? So I think in looking at these opportunities, how do we change that mindset of the retailer to think more like a restaurateur or a restaurant operator, right? And there's quite a few things that start with that. And one thing I always say is what's the destination at the end of the day? Are you a retailer? Or are you really trying to lean into the food service solution side of the business, right? Because I think a lot of times, and part of that is that consumers look at retail as the grocery store, right? They don't necessarily think of them as their first choice for a food service or a food away from home option for them versus that of the restaurant. So what I like to do is, at least when chatting with the members, is kind of challenging them to say, hey, how do we create that destination status within your retail store? So as a consumer, right, if I'm looking for chicken piccata for dinner, or let's say a protein salad bowl for lunch, how do I think about the retailer first versus thinking of a restaurant option per se, right? And part of that is setting up the grocery store for success, where it tells the consumer that we are in this business, right? We're trying to capture share in this business from a quality, from a value, from a pricing standpoint, right? And then I would say another thing that kind of sticks out to me is the restaurant food service world and the retailer world, they use different metrics, right? So on the retailer side of the business, there's usually an inventory centric, very gross margin focused, very category centric in terms of the way that they look at their business and the way that they determine their return on investment. Whereas on the food service side, the restaurant world, they're looking at things like food cost, packaging cost, labor, check average. So a lot of times the metrics are quite a bit different. So rather than, so I challenge a lot of our members to saying, hey, rather than looking at it your traditional percent markup on the gross margin standpoint, think about the destination, think about the consumer perception of quality, think about consumer perception of value and amazing umami food, right? People that are going to drive a purchase and then hopefully a repeat purchase as well at the end of the day. So those are just some of the things that I think kind of hold us back a little bit. But the way I look at it, it's an opportunity for us to break the barrier down a little bit. And we have some members that are doing a phenomenal job at that. And we're trying to use that as best practices with our other members to say, hey, here's XYZ doing it. Here are easy ways to get into the business. And here are things that you can do, right?
I think that's super interesting that you say, think like a restaurateur. Andrew, when I think about restaurants, I know that they're typically not great investments and it's hard to make money and be successful at a restaurant. How can retailers take the advantages of restaurants and combine them with the advantages of a grocery store to be successful in that food service space?
That's a great question, Sean. I think Michael and I have both said this, and we don't have to name any restaurant specifically, but just think of any restaurant, your favorite fancy restaurant or your favorite fast food quick stop. And imagine you are in charge of them starting next week. And you say, hey, we're going to put 4 or 5 aisles of grocery in here so that we can do what grocery stores do, and we can sell dry goods and ingredients and stuff. And then they can also go get their burrito or whatever the restaurant normally does. That place would go into a panic. Where would customers sit? How would they check them out with the folks that are getting waited on by waiters? And then I think about grocery store. And if you said to probably most AWG members with the food service department, you said, hey, we'd like to serve burritos next week. If Michael went in and said, we got a new burrito recipe, they'd be like, okay, send over the ingredients. I think this is a real superpower for grocery stores that a lot of restaurants and QSR folks just don't have. We can meet all the needs of the consumer. You can have a delicious burrito that they can eat right there in store or right when they get home, and they can do their weekly shopping. And I think doing the math for those consumers and showing them that they can, accomplish their normal shopping and get a delicious item to eat then or an hour later is something that grocery uniquely has the advantage in.
Do you think our member retailers can look to an example like Italy and see what they're doing? And, because in my mind, they're like the true hybrid of restaurant and grocery store. Obviously, that's a completely different setup than, your traditional grocery store. But like, what can our retailers take from an example like that?
I think Italy is like you said, just a shining example of this like hybrid. What is it? It's really like some theaters going on there and some kind of aspirational stuff. And I think one of the resources that Michael and I worked to develop this year was a framework for retail food service success, which is a white paper that helps have these strategic conversations. Kind of, if I had to put it in layman's terms, what do you want to be when you grow up, when you are thinking about your food service department? And I think a message I've been harping on to a bunch of our members is there are some really high-end, really North Star operators, but that doesn't mean that you can't take items from their playbook and kind of apply it to what makes sense to your customers and your operations. And I think that white paper that we developed this year really helps you have that high level conversation and think about your strategy and how that applies to your operating model and what that ultimately delivers in consumer experience. And so I think there's no, right answer. I think there are some folks that are leaning in really heavily, foreign ingredients, super high quality, very niche. But I don't think that if you're operating on a more value side of things, that you can't deliver some of those core elements in a way that meets the needs of your customers. So I think when you look at something like Italy, it should just be inspirational, but you should never be discouraged like, oh, well, we can't get pasta directly from Sicily tomorrow. You don't need that. But what can you kind of bring in as far as surprise and delight that makes sense for your customers?
Yeah. And hey, if I can add in there real quick, Sean, just to add on to what Andrew said there, a couple things. One, that framework for food service success that Andrew just referenced, each division VP has shared that out with our members just within the last couple of weeks as part of their division digest. So, and we encouraged everybody to take a look at that. And obviously, hey, talk to our food service deli bakery manager or our specialist to help with that, right? Help in understanding what those pillars are and where the opportunities are, because our team is pretty versed with helping our members exploit that a little bit and try to push on that, right? At the same time. But another thing, just to add on to what Andrew said there, is that the power of that one-stop shop advantage, I like to call it, and that's what Andrew referenced, is if you think about our retail grocery stores, man, they have something that food service competitors don't have, and that's the heavy foot traffic. The heavy foot traffic that come through the front doors of our retailers is a huge competitive advantage, massive. We've got grocery, potentially restaurant food service options, and fuel basically in one stop, right? So for our members to be able to leverage that is a huge competitive advantage versus anybody in the restaurant/C-store industry. So it's certainly something that they can definitely exploit and take advantage of.
Michael, when you're talking to our members who haven't really gotten into the food service game, where do you suggest that they begin?
Yeah, we've been building up an arsenal of programs over the last couple of years. So we speak with the member to try to find out, going back to that framework, it's just like, okay, what do you want your strategy to be, right? The strategy question is always a first question for me, because what's the vision that member has that they want to try to accomplish, right? Are they just trying to get into the business a little bit? And if they do, we have simple, fully prepared meals that they can take, slack out, and put right out into their troughs where people can grab and go a great meal, right? For $6.99, $7.99, $8.99, which is a value, right? On the flip side of it, if they want to get a little bit more in the station concepts, we have actually licensed and franchise brands that they can partner with to bring a really destination experience to the table as well. So it really starts with the member in terms of, okay, what's their appetite for getting into the food service space, right? And then catering something to them, because you want them to build quick wins with it and then continuing to see that growth, as we go forward. Andrew referenced hybrid meals, right? That's been pretty significant over the last 18 months, where what we're finding is consumers like to either, make the center of the plate item and then just buy some sides from us and then accompany their meal with our sides, or they want to be able to make the sides and then buy maybe a center of the plate item from us that's fully prepared, right? So a great example is when you look at the industry right now, that center of the plate meat item, that's up like 5% from a unit standpoint over the last 52 weeks. It's one of the biggest drivers right now. So what we do is when we look at that, we then try to marry up our programs with what's driving that growth and then share that with our members so they can kind of take advantage of it based off, what they're interested in doing per se.
Yeah. So, Andrew, can you talk a little bit about what the consumer experience is like with versus a traditional food service establishment?
Yeah, I'd be glad to. I think this is one of the areas where there's a lot of low-hanging fruit. If you look at especially the QSR side of things, they're delivering a very convenient, very consistent experience across their chains, which are sometimes nationwide. And I know I see our members investing a lot in technology, and technology is kind of a classic. The answer is money. What's your question? So I know that, there's a finite amount of funds towards technology development, but I think it's an important thing to get in front of when you're thinking of your technology stack is how do you not only advertise, but how does the consumer interact with food service at retail when they're interacting with your technology, whether that's through ads that they're getting on your retail media network or just an app that you have, or when they're doing their weekly shopping pickup and they add some items to their cart online. How are you making food service a part of that? Are you making it a separate part? Are you including it? I think of some low-hanging fruit. If you're using any kind of technology or Instacart for your customers and you see that, customer A picks up their weekly groceries either Monday or Tuesday at noon, and you make custom sandwiches in your deli, you should be serving them up some sort of coupon for said sandwich to remind them that not only are they getting their weekly groceries, but they can get an easy lunch while they're on the go that day. So I think customer experience is, something where you can really, do the math for them. If they don't realize that your food service department is there for them, you can kind of get in front of them with it the same way that QSR does.
Yeah, I really enjoy cooking. And so when I'm grocery shopping, I don't even really consider the food service options at the store. I'm just there to get the stuff that I need to make. But the times that I'm at stores that have food service options and they have like the menu at the register, then I'm like, oh, well, maybe I should, get something quick right now. So I'm with you. I think that there are some very, pretty easy ways that you can remind customers like, oh no, we offer prepared food too.
Exactly. Because I think, what you don't want to hear, or what I don't want to hear, is someone that's invested in food service at retail is, oh, well, I got my groceries and then I ran over to XYZ restaurant. I'm like, oh, no. I'm sure your grocery store can help you with those items in some way. And like you're saying, Sean, I think that goes back to the hybrid meal point we made earlier. If you're really invested in cooking, there's those special occasions where you can really put together a whole meal. But I think back to what Mike was saying, whether it's center of plate or sides, like let the consumer kind of choose their journey. They all have different. I've seen so much online about sides and stuff that are fun and easy and create inspiration. And so you can let the consumer browse the produce section and make their cucumber salad that went viral, but then have the main item right there in the food service department so that they've solved the whole meal right then and there. And I think the way you communicate that, whether it's online or in person or a mix of both, is really important.
Well, guys, before I let you get out of here, what's one other thing that retailers need to know about food service?
I'll go first. Let me see. I think, I just spent a good amount of time saying what a superpower all this is. And I'm going to make an interesting call to action that I think is kind of counterintuitive to some of the founding principles of a supermarket, which is, all things under one roof. I think that having a signature item is something that can really set your store apart. When you see stores do it, it can be really powerful. Customers are very busy and they have a lot of decision fatigue. And I think it's easy to go down the rabbit hole, especially because we're retailers at heart and we know we want to be everything to everyone, is taking a second to think about what's one item that I can deliver on taste and quality in a major way so that it sticks out in my customer's mind.
Yeah, no, I really agree. And you mentioned before, like, oh, we can't have, fresh pastas shipped from Sicily every day, but there's something local that you can be offering, like, exactly. And make that the destination. There's something in your town, in your city that everybody wants. And whether that's partnering with somebody else or just making that staple product in your store, I think will drive people there to your food service counter.
Exactly.
Michael, how about you? What do retailers need to know?
Yeah, I do love the point that Andrew brings forward in terms of the signature item, because I always keep that in my strategy as well. And there's so many retailers that are doing it, in the convenience and the retailer space, right? I think of, this past weekend I was in a Wegmans in upstate New York, and Wegmans is like what I consider best in class from a food service standpoint. Now, they don't necessarily have one signature item. Their food quality across their fresh department is superb. But when I think of somebody like Publix down in Florida, their whole sandwich station is, I think, best in class, right? And that's something that can easily parlay or translate over to our members because you have all the ingredients there, right? It's just a matter of creating the destination and leaning in and saying, hey, strategically, this is where we're going, right? This is our operating model and how we're going to get there. And then this is the consumer journey on from point A to point B or point Z, and making sure that it's seamless and take out all the friction points in between, right? Because unlike restaurants, as a grocery retailer, we tend to have a lot of friction points because we're not made to be a restaurant per se. So we're actually asking the consumer to go against the tide a little bit. So we have to think strategically to figure out, okay, what are those barriers of success, those friction points, and how do we pull those out, right? But I would say one thing that to take advantage of as well is never, the digital convenience piece of this, I think, is often forgotten, so the ability to have a menu, like what is your food service menu? And then how are you showing that online, right? Because a lot of times we lump it in just with the groceries, and it's actually a different need state for the consumer, because the consumer need state is either I'm going to buy groceries or am I looking for my dinner tonight, right? So it's a different need state, different time equation there. And I think we have to position ourselves digitally different. What does that menu look like online? Does the consumer have the ability to order it to pick up in 2 hours, right? And if they do pick it up, where are they picking it up at, right? Is it convenient for them, or do they have to track halfway across the store to go pick it up? So I think thinking about that customer journey, and then how do we take out the friction points to make it easy for them? I think as people get into food service, I think that's going to continue to evolve over the next 3, 4, 5 years to take out those friction points on how to make it easier and more convenient for the consumer at the end of the day. And I think the people that get there first are going to win the most when they do so.
And finally, you guys mentioned a couple of white papers. Andrew, can you tell our member retailers where they can go find those if they didn't get them in their email and they're interested in learning some more?
Absolutely. So FMI.org is our website. There's a lot of powerful resources in there that you can access through your AWG membership. AWG members are FMI members. So if you go on fmi.org/fresh foods, you will see all kinds of resources, including our most recent Power of Food Service at Retail, which is a great report we put together with Circana, where we take Circana data and overlay it with our own customer research. So you get to see some really cool insights as to what customers say they're doing versus what they're actually doing at the register, and exploiting those deltas. And then the white paper is also on that website, which takes you through kind of your strategic thinking around food service at retail.
Perfect. And I will have links to those in the show notes as well. Andrew, Michael, thank you for joining me today. I think this was super helpful for all of our retailers.
Thanks so much, Sean.
And thank you all for listening. Please remember to like and subscribe to GrocerPod. That way you can stay up to date on all the latest things going on around AWG. And until next week, this has been Sean Sednar with GrocerPod.